Okay, folks, welcome back to Shadowlands. So this is the last day of patch 9.0, last day for Mythic Plus Dungeons. So I wanted to go over how far I got, why I think I got that far, what I learned, what I'm going to do in 9.1. So I got as far as +8, Mythic +8. Had some trouble around +7. I started out tanking. I eventually switched over to healing. Did considerably better. Part of that comes down to my own fault, I think, of just not knowing the fights that well. Mythic Dungeons and Mythic Plus have different mechanics, so I feel like it's safe to say there's a bit of a learning curve there regardless. However, I had a newer level 60 character that probably should have had better gear, or needed to be better geared. I had done the Covenant campaign, World Quest, Dungeons. I was doing the Time Walking quest to get the reward for that quest, which was a piece of 200 gear at least. I think it changed somewhere in there from a piece of normal raid gear to a piece of heroic raid gear, depending on your item level. I thought as long as I did at least a mythic that was level appropriate, to get a Great Vault reward that would give me a piece of item level gear that was an upgrade, I would eventually get better geared, and over time the progression would become easier, and that didn't seem to happen. What dungeons I did complete, it dropped gear, just not as often as you might think or you might hope they would. Aside from that, aside from the gearing issue, which I would have to say that at least the beginning of Shadowlands, I've had that I can think of in recent memory, the hardest time getting my characters gear in general, for whatever they were trying to do. Other things I learned was that you could upgrade your gear. I had misunderstood that, again, to my own solely down to my own fault. I was looking at a trinket that I wanted to upgrade, and it said that you had to complete everything as a +10 within the time limit. And while that seemed like a steep um, a steep goal to achieve, I thought, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. And had I looked at some of my other gear, you can actually upgrade your gear once you've completed everything as a +5. And I was 2, 3 mythic dungeons away from from that. So I focused on that, and by this point I was quite a ways into doing mythics. So I think that may have put me behind a little bit as far as getting my gear upgraded. Um, didn't really have an issue with valor points necessarily, or getting them or anything like that. They were just sitting there because I didn't think I could use them until um, I started to do plus tens. Um, I stopped at one point, got my legendary, upgraded that as far as I can for um, right now in the game. Um, that kind of kind of didn't make much of a difference. Even with all um, the best item level gear I have, I'm still only 208. I'm not even a 210. Um, it seems like a lot of the people that got to that got to do plus 15 dungeons were raiders, so they had better gear. Um, it a lot of the dungeons that I completed at plus 8, plus 7 had somebody in them that had completed at least over a plus 10, not necessarily a plus 15. Although, according to my add-on that I have that will tell you kind of where people are, um, or what people have done um, in Mythic Plus Dungeons, it told me a lot of people have had at least completed one plus 15. Um, not everyone, but most, and that seemed to be the better groups I was in were the people that were over geared. Um, and again, I did most every other thing I could think of, and at a certain point, um, normal gear um, is a lower item level than what you can get from Mythics, and heroic gear is. So I'm not entirely sure what else I could have done to increase my item level other than doing Mythic sooner. So I could have tried to just do everything sooner to get my item level up. I was hoping to get at least to doing plus 10s. And then if I wanted to try to get to plus 15 for the mount, I could kind of grind out from there. Because that's what I've seen um, other people do. And I thought that was a reasonable goal to at least work towards. The goal being ultimately to try to get to plus 15. Um, it got considerably harder, it seemed like. I know every key kind of has its own metrics. So I'm not sure if there were some difficulty spikes here or there. It's hard to distinguish what's the game and what's the group you're in. Um, I had both tanking and healing. I had some good tanks, and I had some good healers, and then some not so good tanks and some not so good healers. You seem to do, or I seem to do better in groups that had range. Um, as a tank, it seemed like groups that had hunters or demon hunters, um, I seem to struggle a little more. I'm not entirely sure why. Um, if you had mage, um, warlocks, those seem to be the better groups I was in. Didn't really seem to matter too much as a healer. A group was a group. Depending on what the modifier was, melee was a lot harder to um, groups with multiple melee characters were a little bit harder to keep healed up. Um, You do have to watch your mana as a healer now with the stat squish, level squish, all of that. I got some food. I would just eat in between trash pulls or before the boss, and that seemed to that seemed to work fine. Um, I want to um, maybe try to work on leveling alchemy on another character, so I can get a flask and maybe try to use some mana potions. Um, I found a horde character to put alchemy on. My paladin didn't have a profession, so I've leveled alchemy before on another character. I think that I boosted, so she got all her professions and everything maxed out. Just not a big professions person, so I'm gonna look at it though. I was doing some research on it. It seems like it's an easier profession to level. I do better with the gathering professions than I do with the crafting professions. So I have some herbs already, so I'm going to see what all I have and what all I need and see if it's really worth trying to um, level. I'm thinking maybe a stamina flask would be good. Um, from what I could tell, there weren't any flasks that actually helped with mana or healing or anything like that. Um, However, stamina is still its health, so that would still be beneficial. I am going to still do mythics on my monk, at least to begin with. I want to see what a geared character can do at the beginning of trying to progress. Um, I think I want to try to um, play another class as well. I think that was maybe part of my problem was I didn't get burnt out so much, but it's a lot of playing one class and for most of the time playing one spec because I really wanted to do it as a tank and which may have been a bit ambitious considering I don't normally tank as a play a tank spec, at least in um, this context. I will leveling. I have leveled a tank for, or geared a tank, leveled and geared a tank to do other specific things. This was kind of a new experience for me. Um, I think I did okay. Everything was a +5, +6 before I switched over to healing. So I think that's pretty good. Um, it's there's a it's a higher bar for me to try to reach and do better than in 9.1. Even though I didn't get as far as I might have liked, I'm still um, I'm still proud of what I was able to do. I'm still pleased that I actually made some progress. This was also kind of a learning experience to um, really see how progressing would go and everything like that. How gearing would go, how the gear would work, and all of that. How the Great Vault reward would work. This was introduced in Shadowlands, so this is kind of a new thing for everyone. There were several weeks where I got 2 rewards at least. I was one shy of getting all 3 one week. Um, I didn't always take the highest item level upgrade. I tried to factor in the stats as well, and I think that may or may not have um, done a disservice to my wanting to get geared. I didn't really take um, increasing my item level as a priority necessarily. I just thought it was something that would kind of passively happen as I kept trying to progress. Um, and I think I should have focused a little more on actually pushing my item level up. I think that would have helped greatly at different times, especially now that I know the fights and everything. I'm curious to see how I'll do in season 2 of Mythic Plus Dungeons. I was also thinking of trying to find a guild that would do Mythic Plus. That might be a more of a um, that might be a more of a long-term goal. Um, though I still need to get some characters geared and do. Um, there's still some things I want to do. I want to do some Covenant campaigns. Um, I haven't done a lot of stuff in all 4 yet. I've kind of focused just on the Night Fae for this character. I've done some things on um, 1 or 2 of the others. So I'd like to do more of the Covenant campaigns and things like that. So that will let me see the storylines and different things, and at the same time get some more characters geared. Um, I've kind of been of 2 minds trying to figure out which um, characters I wanted to play, which classes and specs. I played Brewmaster, wanted to play Brewmaster because it was a spec that I hadn't really played much at endgame. Because as I previously mentioned, I don't normally tank. And if I tank, I normally tank with my Death Knight, usually. I think that might also have factored in. Um, I think I understand uh, Brewmaster tanking fairly well. It's not um, overly complicated. I feel like I got some really good trinkets early on. Blood splattered scale gives me a shield. Slimy compulsive organ heals me. This one is super helpful. I've tried my best to keep both of these. I want to upgrade these if at all possible. Um, I I've heard different people say different things about Brewmaster tanks. I wasn't completely unfamiliar with tanking. Um, However, I hadn't played Brewmaster much. Again, outside of just leveling or some other specific purpose. I don't know the things that I wasn't aware of. Somebody had said something at one point about I started out dual wielding because that was why I was played Brewmaster before, was you could dual wield. Um, I just always thought that was cool that you could be a tank and dual wield weapons. It was mentioned at one point that dual wielding wasn't as good as just having a two-handed weapon. Um, I did some investigating. That is partially true. However, the overall um, opinion from what I found from some official sources and just players was that it didn't really make much of a difference. While there were slight advantages to two-handed weapons, dual wielding wasn't going to dampen your um, play style or your playability or anything like that. That said, I didn't have the I didn't dual wield very long before I got a two-handed weapon, and I can't really tell much of a difference. The stats were probably where I noticed the biggest difference of anything, and that was trying to. Hold on here, I need to swap out this ring. There we go. The stats were the biggest difference I noticed. Tried to keep versatility as low as possible. Focusing on mastery, haste, critical strike. Um, my critical strike had been at least 20% or higher starting out. My haste has been around 10%, which seems fine. When I join a group, it usually gets increased to about 20%. And that seems more than enough. Monks are um, an energy um, resource class. So the more haste you have, the more your energy, the quicker your energy will regenerate. So it's not a bad thing to have. um, it's just I don't know that you would want to. I just didn't see prioritizing this as a main stat. I had more trouble with cooldowns, which haste will also help with your global cooldown. Um, and then mastery was my main focus. My thinking being that since blackout kick gives you dodge, you could get your mastery high enough where you could just always have a higher percentage of dodge and you wouldn't take as much damage. That did and didn't seem to work. I don't know if I just didn't get the percentage high enough, um, or if I'm misunderstanding how dodge works. I have gotten my dodge when fighting mobs and bosses um, pretty high. Blackout kick has a cooldown. It's a 4-second cooldown. It is a cooldown. It's a bit of a weird. It's a bit of a weird addition into tanking. I have shields with um, other things like Celestial Brew, Stagger. Stagger was something that I kind of learned. There was a bit of a learning curve there that I was surprised to um, discover. I actually learned a lot more about Stagger when I did Torghast to try to get to start when I was getting Soul Ash for my legendary. I kept looking at the when I would die. I kept looking at what killed me, And if you don't stay on top of your stagger, which I apparently wasn't, it'll actually just basically put a dot on you and start to do damage over time. Because there were a few times I died and I could not figure out from what for. I kept watching my health, it kept going down. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Um, and then when I would look after I died, it was because of stagger. So I started using Purifying Brew more. I got a conduit that gives me a shield when I use Purifying Brew. So I actually have my trinket um, as a shield, Celestial Brew as a shield, and Purifying Brew as a shield. So, um, and with that conduit, it helps me um, to use Purifying Brew more, so I'm clearing my stagger more often, so I'm not taking as much damage. Outside of that, I started using charge more recently. I took off. Where is it here? Where am I overlooking it? I took off Tiger Palm. Um, Even though it reduces the cooldown of my brews, it uses energy. And what I was finding was that I was using energy that I needed for Keg Smash, Expel Harm, and there was something else. I think it was Spinning Crane Kick when I was using it. I started out with Spinning Crane Kick and then swapped out to Rushing Jade Wind. Because the Rushing Jade Wind will just put a whirlwind around me and then still allow me to use something else. Spinning Crane Kick is channeled and does very low damage. So I could not seem to make this work. The effect with the healing spheres and everything, Expel Harm pretty much does the same thing. With Crash, I had misread this as somewhat of a charge, and that's what it does. However, it makes you and the target meet halfway. If the target doesn't move for whatever reason, it still somewhat functions as a taunt. So it's helping to keep threat, which once I got my versatility down, threat didn't become as much of an issue. Not entirely sure why. It doesn't do anything with threat as far as I know. It increases damage, which damage has to do with threat. Outside of that, you think the decreasing damage would be helpful. And healing, a little more versatility did seem to help. I was playing around. As you saw, I swapped out rings there. This one has way more versatility. The mastery didn't seem to, as a Mistweaver, the mastery didn't seem to matter as much. I have over 100% mastery. And the difference between 129 and 60 was minimal. As a Mistweaver. The difference between 130 versatility and 55 haste did seem to make quite a bit of difference with versatility, of course. Haste doesn't, other than directly affecting my um, abilities, specifically Essence Font, which is a channeled ability. Haste really doesn't do much for Mistweavers. So a little bit more versatility seemed to help as Mistweaver. Did not seem to help much as a Brewmaster. Um, I couldn't completely get rid of versatility, which was my goal. I was hoping to find something that had leech or avoidance or something in it, on it, that I just never got anything. So much of what I got had versatility. Um, and yeah, so I've tried to minimize it as much as possible. Um, is there anything else that I didn't go over? Um, went over how far I got, why I think I got that far, what I learned, um, which I don't know if I mentioned, so I will mention again anyway because I think it bears repeating. If I didn't, if you, the idea, of course, of a Mythic Plus is to complete it before the time runs out. If you do finish it and you are over time, you do not get your key does not get upgraded. However, you still do get loot from the final boss, or at the end of the dungeon, and you still do get a Great Vault reward, and or your Great Vault reward will be upgraded. That was something I did not know. The Great Vault is a new thing in Shadowlands, so that was kind of a learning curve. I think at times I was more focused on the progression rather than finishing the just finishing the dungeon. And sometimes that can be very, very helpful, especially with the Great Vault reward, because even if you go over time, which I surprisingly did not do very often, there were a few here and there. If you can get the reward, the reward at the end, try to get some kind of gear, or hopefully get some kind of gear at the end that's helpful, and then upgrade or get your Great Vault reward. That will, even if you go over on one dungeon you do, and then you're able to complete a higher dungeon, your Great Vault reward will still, your Great Vault reward, your season best, everything will get pushed. It's the best key that you did, so the highest, best completed dungeon within the time limit. So there is a little bit of flexibility there. It's disappointing that you can be in groups, 20, 30, 40 minutes, get to the last boss, and for whatever reason, not be able to finish the last boss and not really get anything for that time. However, Mythic Plus are supposed to be more difficult dungeons, so I suppose that goes hand in hand. And I think that pretty well covers it. I'm not thinking of anything that I forgot to mention. So there you go. Again, that was my thoughts and to a greater or less extent my ramblings on Mythic Plus Dungeons for 9.0. My first real um, season, I guess you would say, trying to progress in them. Um, how far I got, why I think I got that far, what I learned, what I'm going to do in 9.1. Um, I think I had done this almost exclusively um, the last few months, so I want to focus on this. However, do more of the other stuff in the game. Enjoy the rest of the game um, as well. I think I was a little had a little tunnel vision at times, um, thinking that this was or realizing this was going to be difficult, so I needed to focus and try to progress as far as I could, as reasonably quickly as I could, and that can be good and bad. You can end up distracting yourself, and in trying to stay focused, you can actually lose focus of what you're trying to do and miss things. And I think I missed some small things like the item upgrades and exactly, with different things with the Great Vault reward and what have you, the legendary. I have mixed feelings about the legendary. Um, it's nice. I picked something neutral. Um, it reduces the cooldown on touch of death, which I thought would be fairly neutral if I did decide to switch to Windwalker or Mistweaver. And I thought as a tank that would, um, if we had lost some time, um, Touch of Death could maybe help us gain a few seconds here or there to kind of make up for that. So I did try to think in terms of what would be good for me and the group um, overall as a whole. So yeah, so there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.